Hey all, here are OS Reviews. With the debut of the Google Pixel 8 series, Android 14 was also officially unveiled to the public. Older gen Pixels, including the Pixel 6 here, received the update on the same day that it was unveiled, so I've been using it for about a week's time and wanted to share some of my impressions on this rather incremental software update. Third-party companies including Samsung, OnePlus, Xiaomi are expected to start pushing Android 14 updates on top of their own skin, although that might still take a couple of weeks to a couple of months depending on how fast those companies execute those software updates. For the most part, widgets as well as the Material UI view, in terms of these rounded corners that are slightly more cartoonish introduced with Android 13, are still here, including the fact that it requires 2 taps to turn on or off Wi-Fi, which was something that wasn't met with critical acclaim back when Android 13 debuted. Unfortunately, is still here and hasn't been really addressed. So in the past, you could simply tap on the icon here to turn on and off Wi-Fi, but now it requires, again, 2 steps, tapping in once and then again to turn it on or off, since all of the internet connectivity options, including cellular, have been bundled into this one option here. With that being said, perhaps the biggest change visually would be to the lock screen, and now you're able to add additional shortcuts on the bottom of the phone. So in this example, I've added in a shortcut for the flashlight at the very top that you can tap on to turn it on or off, as well as a QR code scanner right from this main home screen, which you can hold on for just a few seconds to quickly activate without unlocking the phone. Similarly, the main interface here in terms of the clock can also be customized now, giving us some more creative options, including analog style clocks if you prefer, other ones which are a little bit more cartoonish, as you can tell, other fonts altogether which are much larger and even more dramatic, slightly more cute, cartoonish looking, and there's also one which spans all the corners of the phone, so you get a full view from various angles, including the weather information. Hopefully we'll see even more fonts as well as ways to customize this view in the future, but it's a good start and certainly nice to have. Otherwise, Android 14 has some subtle software optimization. In my personal experience on this Pixel 6, I've noticed about 1 additional hour of screen on time after upgrading, which isn't always the case when new OSs get released, but it's great that there was some more optimization being done behind the scenes, and it's resulting in the Pixel 6 and 7 series typically getting a little bit less toasty when it comes to the thermals, as well as, again, just getting a little bit longer battery endurance. I have also noticed that the fingerprint unlock tends to be a touch faster as compared to Android 13 as well for some reason, which is definitely a nice change. Overall speed of operation when it comes to the UI still feels fluid and very similar to what we had on Android 13. Another subtle improvement on Android 14 here is the ability to choose a quick setting for toggling into a quote-unquote monochrome theme mode, but it's a little bit misleading because things like the wallpaper and a lot of the third-party app icons are still going to be in full color. It's really only when jumping into some utility tools like the calculator do you get more of this black and white monochrome view. So to be completely honest, I don't think that this feature is quite as fully fleshed out as perhaps some of the demos from Google made it seem like during the press release, especially since under well-being, Android already had grayscale modes available in the past that did a similar thing of turning the entire screen black and white if you wanted it. Other subtle improvements include a UI overhaul on the weather information card. If you're tapping on this with the adaptive widget here from the homepage, it will jump into a view that's slightly cleaner, kind of an hour-by-hour view of when you can expect rain or other weather conditions to come across. It just looks a little bit more clean with these rounded corners that are aligning with the whole Material UI theme. Material U refinements can also be seen in the back gesture, which is now slightly more rounded, and that's the main reoccurring theme of Android 14, being it's a slightly more optimized and refined version of Android 13. Don't expect anything dramatic. Kind of like how we went from the Pixel 6 to the Pixel 7, just fixing some of those minor details, but nothing overly dramatic. Otherwise, there are some software improvements if we dig a little bit deeper, but honestly, at this point in time, these features aren't something that we can still fully take advantage of just yet. For example, support natively for Ultra HDR, which Google claims can provide even more contrast and details in photos, but of course your phone needs to support HDR in terms of the display technology, and also the images that you take need to have this extra information being captured. There are some new functions, including a generative AI-based wallpaper tool. Under Android 13, Pixel devices already had an emoji workshop method of generating your own favorite wallpapers. You can choose a color as well as your favorite patterns and also emojis, and it will generate some custom wallpapers for you to use. But the new generative AI powered wallpaper tool should take that to the next level, similar to tools like DALL-E from ChatGPT. With that being said, that is only going to be available to specific devices such as the Pixel 8 series. So again, a feature that's not really going to be felt by owners of older gen devices. What I will say though is that the camera app has received a slight update, mirroring the interface from the Pixel 8. Older gen Pixels can now switch back and forth more easily between recording video and capturing images using the toggle down below here, as opposed to relying on a separate slider on the side to record video. Aside from that, another feature that was played around with during the early development of Android 14 was the ability to use the phone as a webcam, very similar to what iPhone users can do with a Mac computer. So you can connect it by USB to your Windows or Chromebook, and then under USB preferences, select webcam, and that will be allowing you to use your smartphone's much higher quality front or rear-facing camera as your webcam when you're video conferencing. That being said, this is also a feature that doesn't seem to be quite universal either, which is a little bit on the unfortunate side, but still an interesting function nonetheless. Now, everything else about the Android 14 update, though, are mostly around accessibility. For example, when it comes to notifications, there's a new flash notification mode that you can trigger, including using the camera flash as well as the screen flash to notify you when there's an incoming call, for instance, which is a pretty neat idea if your phone is facing down, for instance, making it a little easier to know if there's an alarm or the incoming call that you have on your phone. Along those same lines, when it comes to the font size, Android 14 is getting you up to 200 times magnification. So for folks, including the elderly, for example, that might be slightly vision impaired, you're able to just magnify everything on the UI, making the phone more comfortable and easy to use. In fact, the magnifier tool, which you can also download, uses the camera to further zoom in digitally onto objects, but does a little bit of additional processing just to make the image sharper and clearer to see. This might be useful if you're at an airport, for example, you're trying to zoom into a billboard or a specific sign that's further away. You can further crank up the exposure, invert the color just to make it clearer and easier to read. And by default, it's not being saved onto your phone's album. It doesn't take up storage unless you physically tap on save. And then as usual, security and privacy continues to be an area that gets tightened up over time, and with Android 14, you get even more kind of permissions that pop up whenever you're trying to install an app that requires you to share location services, for example, just making it more easy for you to know what you are sharing with third-party app developers. Another option here called Health Connect, acting as a consolidated hub of all the data that you're sharing and collecting from wearables and smart health tracking tools. It's quite similar to how Google will automatically save some of your password information. It's trying to do the same thing tied to your account. So if you're transferring between devices, it will be more easily synced in the future. With that being said, not everything is necessarily great. For example, as part of the heightened security policies, Google is no longer permitting Android 5.0 and below applications from being installed on Android 14 devices. Historically, backwards compatibility with older APK files, sideloading them, and running them even on newer versions of phones has been an advantage on Android in general compared to iOS devices. So if there are certain legacy tools or programs that haven't been updated in a long time, well, you're kind of out of luck. They won't be installable on newer Android 14 phones. That is a bit unfortunate, even though Google says it's in an aim to prevent any malicious activity from happening on older versions of apps and may have higher chances of security loopholes. So do keep that in mind if you're trying to run a specific older legacy app that is, again, built for Android Lollipop or below. Well, you may want to stick on Android 13 or look for actually a slightly older version of the OS as a result, especially since system fluidity and the overall experience hasn't dramatically changed, to be completely honest, of this Android 14, aka upside down cake. So that is Android 14 in recap, and I would say again, it's a very minor incremental update. Granted, the slight improvements in battery optimization are definitely nice to have, as well as the increased customization on the lock screen being the two, which I would say are perhaps the most prominent. And it takes up around 1 to 2 gigabytes of space, by the way, for you to fully upgrade to the new OS, depending on your device. Perhaps some cons include the fact that the two-stage shortcut for turning on or off Wi-Fi still remains. I'm not sure why Google can't provide another option for just simply tapping once on the quick shade for turning that on and off. plus no longer able to install older legacy APK files. Although for the majority of folks, I suppose it shouldn't be a huge loss. That's been a closer look at Android 14's official version, some of the new features, as well as my thoughts and impressions after slightly longer term usage. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews.